Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Cleo's Corner. Hey, where are you right now? I mean, really, if a life was on the line and you had to make sure that help arrived where you were right now, what would be the most efficient way to tell someone where on this enormous globe you are? That is our question for today. How do we organize this world of ours and find where we are in it? How have those methods changed over the years? In the Five Themes of Geography episode, we go into more detail about the differences in how we describe where we are. But for our purposes today, we're only going to talk about absolute location, or the exact spot on Earth where you are. You are currently in a spot that is unique from everyone else in the world, even the classmates that you are sitting around. If you find yourself in the exact same spot as your classmate, then please tell that person to kindly get off your lap and go back to their own seat. Seriously though, humans have been trying to understand the world around us since the very beginning. It did not take us long to start drawing pictures of our world and marking easily recognizable landmarks so that we could remember where we have been and how to get back. Thus were maps born. At their most basic, maps are copies or drawings of how we perceive the world around us. But our Earth is really big, and to help break it down, geographers developed a grid system to mark specific places on the map and determine your location very exactly. These imaginary lines are drawn on maps to give people reference points. They are called latitude and longitude. Sometimes they get a little confusing, but once you get the hang of it, they make total sense. Here are two views of our Earth. One is looking at the Earth from the top, and the other is looking at Earth from the side. There are more accurate words for that, but that's a different episode. Latitude lines are drawn east to west and look a little like a ladder when you look at the Earth from the side. When you look at latitudes from the poles, they look like a bullseye. There is a total of 90 degrees in the north, ending at the North Pole, and 90 degrees in the south, ending at the South Pole. They start at zero, at a special latitude line exactly halfway between the North and South Poles called the equator. Sometimes latitude lines are called parallels because they go all the way around the Earth and they never touch each other. They measure how far north or south of the equator you are. Latitude is based on the relationship between the sun and the earth, and sailors figured out latitude long ago using lots of ingenious tools that we can learn about later. On the other hand, you have longitude lines. Longitude lines are a little trickier because they do a similar thing, but they act a little different. Longitude lines are drawn north to south, between the North and South poles. Looking from above, longitude lines look like the spokes of a bicycle wheel. Sometimes they're also called meridians. They start at a special meridian called the prime meridian. The prime meridian runs through the famous port city of Greenwich, England. While people understood latitude for a long time and could tell how far north and south they were, it was much harder to accurately determine your location east and west. When Great Britain ruled most of the world, a British man developed the idea of using time to calculate how far you were away from a certain point. Britain adopted the system using the Royal Observatory in Greenwich as the starting point. Pretty soon, the whole world adopted the system, and we still use it today. Longitude lines measure how far away you are from the prime meridian. However, when you look at the Earth from the side, longitude lines don't look straight. They look curved, and they get more curved the farther away from the prime meridian you get. Many times people get lost with longitude because they don't follow the line as it curves, and they just trace straight up or down. There are a total of 180 degrees east and 180 degrees west of the prime meridian. and they meet on the other side of the world at another special meridian called the International Date Line. That meridian marks the spot when one day becomes the next day. Like I said, maps have been made since the beginning, and humans still continue to improve the accuracy and quality of maps. Originally, maps were made by physically walking or sailing the world. Surveyors physically had to measure the entire world with special equipment. Today, surveyors still do that, but they have new tools to make the job much easier. Today, we use remote sensing with planes, satellites, lasers, drones to make far more accurate pictures of our world and then turn those into maps. In fact, it was only once we put satellites into orbit in the 1960s that humans were able to see parts of the Earth that had not been well surveyed in the past. All of this data in all of its different forms is known as GIS, or Global Information Systems. It includes all the tools, computer programs, and data that is gathered. Now that we have satellites that can talk to each other and to our various devices, cars, phones, we can pinpoint where you are extremely accurately using GPS or the Global Positioning System. We all use GPS every day without even knowing it. And to answer the question for the day, if your life really depended on it, emergency personnel could easily ping your phone or car and mark you immediately on the globe. However, what the GPS is using is just a high-tech version of good old latitude and longitude. Reading latitude and longitude can be a little tricky until you get the hang of it, but it's not much different from a grid that you might use in math class. The equator and the prime meridian make up the x and y axes. Latitude and longitude is written with a number followed by a small circle that represents the degrees. Sometimes you might see a second number with a small hash mark after it. That represents the minutes. That might sound confusing because we normally think of minutes as time, but really the word minute just means a small piece of something. So a minute is a small piece of an hour, and a minute steak is just a really small steak. The distance between 41 degrees north and 42 degrees north, for example, is about 65 miles. So what happens if you're halfway between the 2 degrees? Well, you can say that you're 41.5 degrees, and that's okay in some ways, but to be really accurate, you need to use minutes. Just like time, there are 60 minutes between each degree. So if you were halfway between 41 and 42 degrees, then you would say that you are 41 degrees and 30 minutes. The coordinate address is then completed with an N or S and an E or W following the number to tell you if you are in the north or south hemisphere or the east or west hemisphere. You must always have two sets of numbers to find your location, and together we call these a coordinate address. So, in our episode today, we investigated how people find where they are on the planet. We learned about latitude and longitude lines and how they make up a grid pattern on the Earth. We learned how to read a coordinate address. We also learned that people have been making maps for thousands of years, but we are still making those maps better and more accurate through modern technologies. With this information and a little practice, you will never find yourself lost, no matter where you roam. See you on our next episode of Cleo's Corner.